You think you got him tackled?
The 31-year-old today announced he is retiring from pro football after 10 seasons.
Watch this. Watch number 42, the safety. He turns him completely around. Watch this. Here, goodbye. Hello, where are you? Thank
you. I've searched my heart through and through and feel comfortable with this decision.
If you were asked to name the best running back of all time, there are a few names you might go with. Walter Payton, Emmitt Smith, Jim Brown. Younger fans might want to say Adrian Peterson or even Derrick Henry. However, if you ask who the most exciting back ever is, there is only one name that pops into mind, and that would be Barry Sanders. The Hall of Famer has a truly enviable highlight reel, and his career includes a ton of memorable moments and records. What was the span of Sanders' career truly like though? Here is a look at the career of Barry, from the first juke to the final spin move. Sanders was born and raised in Wichita, Kansas, where he played his high school football. While he was a starting running back in his sophomore season, as a junior he was moved behind his brother Byron on the depth chart. Barry wouldn't become the starter again until his senior season, where he averaged 10.2 yards per carry over a 7-game run as the lead back. You would think that Sanders would have had a ton of colleges knocking down his door. That didn't happen. Maybe they were concerns about his size, as Sanders was 5'8" and 200 pounds. No one can say for sure, but only 3 FBS schools offered him a scholarship: Iowa State, Oklahoma State, and Tulsa. Even though he was lightly recruited, former Oklahoma State assistant George Wallstad remembers being surprised at how athletic Barry was. Wallstad said, "When I was recruiting him, it was during the start of basketball season. He was playing basketball, but he was gimping a little bit because he had just twisted his ankles in the last football season. So he was out there bouncing the ball around by himself before practice started. I was sitting up in the stands, up on the bleachers, and I said, 'Barry, can you dunk it?' He said, 'Well, yeah.' I'm going, 'No.' He was barely 5'8", and so he backs off. I said, 'Well, you got that bad ankle.' He says it'll be okay. So he started right above the cone up there and dribbled, and he can dunk. And I'm going, ooh, I think we're going to take this kid." I already made up my mind we were. But I didn't realize he had that kind of vertical. Ultimately, Sanders chose the Cowboys, but he didn't immediately hit the ground running. In 1986 and 1987, Sanders was actually the second-string running back for Oklahoma State. However, you can kind of understand why. Barry's predecessor for the Cowboys, that would be Hall of Famer Thurman Thomas. While he was in the lead back in his first 2 years in college, Sanders still used his elusiveness and speed to make a splash for Oklahoma State. In 1987, he led the nation in kickoff return average, picking up a whopping 31.6 yards per return. Thomas moved to the pros, and the starting job was Barry's. You could say that Sanders took to being a starting running back quite well. Barry averaged 7.6 yards per carry, ran for over 300 yards 3 times, and set the record for the most rushing yards in a season with 2,628 and the most rushing touchdowns with 37. This was when bowl game numbers weren't counted, mind you. If you add in his bowl performance, Sanders rushed for 2,850 yards in 1988. Oh, he still returned kicks and punts, by the way. It won't surprise you to find out Sanders won the Heisman after his junior campaign. Weirdly, he only got 68% of the votes. The other two in the top 3 were USC QB Rodney Peete and UCLA QB and future Hall of Famer
Troy Aikman.
Nevertheless, the trophy was his, and Sanders decided to skip his senior campaign to enter the NFL draft. After that season, who can blame him? David Ware, Sanders' agent, remembers it like this. Barry decided to challenge the NFL on their rule of not allowing juniors to enter the draft. Before he could play for the Lions, he had to first be drafted, and before that time, juniors couldn't be entered in. We sat down with him to map out a legal strategy so that the NFL would change their minds. So we sit down with Barry. Here's what we're up against. And if we lose this petition, then you can't play. You have to do something else because once you sign with an agent, you can't play collegiately. So we'll get this petition ready. We'll file it. So Barry said, well, let me ask you this. They're not questioning whether or not I can play, are they? I said no. He said, oh, okay. Then I'm sure that they'll let me in, and if not, just send them the highlights. And I just thought, that was typical Barry. Like, you guys aren't serious? You're not going to keep me out because of some artificial rule. Take a look at the highlights. Detroit was choosing between Barry and Deion Sanders with the 3rd overall pick in the 1989 draft. Both would have been fine choices. Heck, even 4th overall pick Derek Thomas would have been a home run for the Lions. However, Detroit's head coach Wayne Fontes wanted Barry, and no fan is going to complain that he got his way. Sanders missed training camp with a contract issue, signing his rookie contract only days before the Lions season opener in 1989. Still, Barry showed that his speed and agility were going to serve him just fine in the pros. From the beginning, he wowed with his ability to avoid being hit and break tackles as well. Sanders made a memorable debut September 10th of that year, running for 71 yards and a touchdown on 9 carries in a loss to the Phoenix Cardinals. Former Lions assistant Dave Levy remembers that we had no intention of putting him in a football game yet, but we're playing the game, getting our ass beat, and in the 3rd quarter, Wayne calls me up and says, let's put Barry in. I said, God dang, Wayne, he only knows 3 plays, and he said, okay, we'll call those. So we did, and I think he made 70-some yards. Legendary USC head coach John McKay had an old saying, and Wayne followed it pretty good. Don't coach the great ones too much because you don't want to tamper down their talent. And his talent was pretty obvious. He rushed for 1,470 yards and 14 touchdowns in his rookie campaign. Sanders entered the final week of his rookie season neck and neck with the Chiefs' Christian Okoye for the rushing title. Bob Gagliano, Lions quarterback from 1989 to 90, said he rushed for 158 yards, and then they pulled Barry out of the game. And you look up at the scoreboard and Christian Okoye just finished their game in Kansas City and is 10 yards ahead of Barry for the rushing title in the NFL. And Wayne Fontes and some people came, Barry, you want to go in and get your 11 yards, get your title? He just said no, let the other guy play. I mean, think about that. There's got to be a pretty nice bonus attached to winning the rushing title, and he says no, let the other guy go ahead and play. I went up to him myself. Wayne went up to him. When I sat next to him, I said, hey, Barry, you sure you don't want the rushing title? He goes, nah, that's okay. I'm like, okay, that's Barry. He wasn't one to love the limelight. He was not that kind of a guy. He'd rather see someone else shine. That's truly the humility and the humbleness of Barry Sanders. And I get tickled just talking about him because I just love the guy. Detroit won the NFC Central in 1991 and 1993, and that 1991 team made it to the NFC Championship game. The Lions lost 41-10 to Washington, and Sanders never made it to a Super Bowl, but he carried the franchise further than anybody in the Super Bowl era. The 1994 season was big for Sanders. In addition to rushing for 1,883 yards, 5.7 yards per carry, he added 283 yards receiving to finish with over 2,000 yards from scrimmage. Sanders also managed to rush for 237 yards in one game without scoring a touchdown somehow. A bizarre NFL record, but a record nonetheless. For his efforts, Sanders was named Offensive Player of the Year for the first time. To many, what set Sanders apart was his work ethic. Team historian Bill Keenest remembers a time during the last week of the 1996 season where he saw Barry working late after hours. He says, practice ends and Wayne was doing some media on the field and was dealing with that. And then I came into the locker room looking for Barry. But that time, a lot of the guys had left already for the day, and Barry's clothes were still in his locker. So I checked the training room, meeting rooms, couldn't find him. Then I thought he's not back out on the field doing an interview. So went back out and the field was empty. So now I'm thinking maybe he forgot. I've got to help with these quotes for the story that's running later that day. So I walked down the tunnel again toward the field, and then for some reason I decided to check our weight room, which was underneath the stands right off the tunnel. And I opened the door and I could hear the weights in the weight room. And there's one guy in there, and that's Barry. He's getting a workout in. He said, give me a half hour, 45 minutes, whatever it was. I said, okay, I'll come back down. So I got back down there a few minutes ahead of time of when he said he'd be done, and the locker room is dark by this time. There's nobody around. So I go down to the weight room. It's dark. So I go back and check his locker. His clothes are still in there. And now I'm convinced he's just hiding or he headed home. So I just decided to walk out onto the field, just through the doors. It's the last week, remember? And it's dark, cold, dreary, gray day. So by this time, all the lights in the Silver Dome are turned off. They have safety lights on, so it's a real eerie atmosphere. And I walk through the tunnel door, and there's a single solitary figure running gassers on the field. Barry Sanders. To me, that's the greatness of Barry Sanders. Up until 1997, only 2 NFL backs had ever rushed for over 2,000 yards in a season, O.J. Simpson and Eric Dickerson. When Sanders only had 53 yards on 25 carries in 2 games to start the 1997 campaign, nobody could have thought he would reach that milestone. However, he then proceeded to rush for over 100 yards in 14 consecutive games, an NFL record. Barry finished with 2,053 yards, then the second most in NFL history. Sanders obviously got a lot of love for his 2,000-yard campaign in 1997. He was named Offensive Player of the Year, and an MVP win seemed obvious. Indeed, he did win MVP, but he had to share it. Namely, he had to share it with division rival Brett Favre. Hey, NFL voters love a quarterback, don't they? Sanders did not replicate the 2,000-yard season in 1998. For most players, rushing for 1,491 yards would be an incredible success. Indeed, even for Barry, that's a good year. However, it actually was the end of an era for Sanders. When Sanders rushed for 1,491 yards in 1998, it ended a 4-year run of rushing for over 1,500 yards, an NFL record. Sanders turned 30 right before the 1998 NFL season. For a running back, that is just about the end of your career. But Sanders had just rushed for 1,491 yards in 1998, as I mentioned. Surely he had plenty left in his tank. We'll never know. In July of 1999, Sanders faxed a letter to the Wichita Eagle, his hometown newspaper. It declared that he was retiring. However, it wasn't a complete surprise to everyone. Sanders indicated to multiple other teammates during the 1998 season that he was considering retirement. He finally made it official by faxing a statement to his hometown paper, and while the timing was a bone of contention for some, it might not have been entirely his own doing. Former Lions running back Ron Rivers claims that it might have been a favor to him. Rivers stated, "I told him, I said, look, if you retire," cause I talked to him on the phone, cause we were at home. It wasn't even camp yet. I said, if you retire, do me a favor. Wait till the last minute, cause that means they have to give me a chance to start. And they won't go out and get somebody else. And he said, okay, I'll let you know, I'll let you know, I'll let you know. And shortly later, he told me that he was retiring. I don't know. If he waited as a favor to me, I would like to think he did. Sanders only played in 10 seasons in his NFL career. He was named first-team All-Pro in 6 of those seasons and second-team in the other 4. Unsurprisingly, when the NFL named its All-Decade team for the 90s, Sanders made the squad at running back. One of the reasons fans and the media were so surprised that Sanders retired at the age of 31 was that he was so close to being the NFL's all-time leading rusher. Sanders retired with 15,269 career rushing yards. Walter Payton, then the leading all-time rusher, had 16,726. Emmitt Smith has since passed Payton on the list, but had Sanders played a couple more seasons, the record would likely be his to this day. While Sanders played his entire career with the Lions, and he is the greatest player in franchise history, there was a rough patch for the player and the franchise after his abrupt retirement. The Lions weren't happy with this. In fact, they demanded Sanders return $5.5 million of his signing bonus, and when he refused, the Lions sued. Needless to say, this caused bad blood. Fortunately, everything is alright between Sanders and the Lions now. In 2010, he was part of introducing a Lions and Bears game on Monday Night Football. He started to pop up at team events again. In fact, in 2017, he joined the team as an official ambassador of the Lions. Barry is back where he should be, as a face of the Detroit Lions franchise. Sanders was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2004, and while the day was about him, he still did his best to stay in the background. Kent Falb, Lions trainer, 1966 to 2000, remembers that he wasn't only elusive on the field, he was elusive in public. Because that guy could hide in a crowd better than anybody I've ever seen. He went to his Hall of Fame induction, and we went up the canton, and it was the day before the actual induction, so they had all the former Hall of Fame winners on risers in front of the hall. And then one by one the new inductees came up. And John Elway came in a limousine, and someone else came in a limousine. They all came in limousines, and all of a sudden they're standing there, and you could hear them say, "Where's Barry?" And pretty soon here comes Barry, walking up the hill all by himself, and he stands in the front row with these other guys. And the women in front of us behind the ropes said to her husband, "Who's that little guy? What's he doing in there?" Those are some of the memorable things. I'll tell you what, he was absolutely a perfect gentleman to my assistant and myself. He never gave us a problem. Leave your top 5 running backs lists in the comments below, and I will let you know what I think as well. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe and check out these videos on screen right now. See you next time.